What happens when a flight attendant mistreats a humble passenger in a wheelchair, only to discover he's the CEO of the airline? This story of respect, redemption, and a powerful lesson will leave you speechless. It was a chilly Thursday morning, and the airport buzzed with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to catch their flights. Among them was James, a middle-aged man who rolled into the terminal in his wheelchair. James wore a simple jacket, a baseball cap, and a warm smile that hinted at a calm demeanor. He looked like any other traveler, but James was no ordinary passenger. The flight he was boarding was for an important business meeting. However, his identity as the CEO of one of the world's largest airlines was something he preferred to keep private. He liked to travel incognito to understand his customers' experiences firsthand. Today, though, would bring an experience he would never forget. As James approached the check-in counter, the flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, gave him a quick glance. She was impeccably dressed in her uniform, her polished appearance matched by her sharp tone. "Can I help you?" she asked, her smile tight and forced. James nodded. "Yes, I'm flying to Denver. Here's my ticket." Sarah took one look at his wheelchair and sighed audibly. "You'll need special assistance, won't you?" she said, her voice laced with impatience. She tapped away on her computer as if he were an inconvenience rather than a valued customer. James's smile faltered for a moment, but he simply nodded. "Yes, I'll need a little help." "Great," Sarah muttered under her breath, clearly annoyed. She called over a colleague to arrange for someone to assist him to the gate. Once James was out of earshot, she rolled her eyes and whispered to another attendant, "Can you believe this? Some people really make things difficult for us." Her colleague glanced at James and frowned. "That's not okay, Sarah. Everyone deserves respect." But Sarah shrugged it off, chuckling as if it were a joke. The flight was boarding, and James patiently waited his turn. He watched as other passengers moved forward, handing their tickets to Sarah, the flight attendant at the gate. She greeted each person with a practiced smile, her tone cheerful but impersonal. James waited until the boarding area was almost clear, not wanting to rush anyone or draw unnecessary attention to himself. Finally, it was his turn. As he wheeled himself toward the gate, Sarah's smile wavered. Her polished demeanor faltered for a moment as her eyes landed on him. She let out an audible sigh, and her shoulders slumped slightly. "Here we go," she muttered under her breath, though her voice was loud enough for James and a few nearby passengers to hear. The words stung, but James maintained his calm expression, pretending not to notice. As James handed over his ticket, Sarah's tone shifted. She addressed him with exaggerated loudness, as though he might struggle to understand her. "We'll have to lift you onto the plane. I hope you're okay with waiting. This might take a while." James met her gaze with unwavering politeness and nodded. "That's fine. Take your time," he replied, his voice steady and kind, though her condescending tone hadn't gone unnoticed. Sarah gave a curt nod and flagged down another crew member to assist. She didn't make eye contact with James again, instead turning her attention to the next passenger in line. James wheeled himself to the side and waited patiently as the assistance crew arrived to help him board. He couldn't help but notice the sideways glances and hushed whispers from other passengers, but he kept his composure, focusing on the task of getting aboard. Once on board, Sarah's behavior took a sharper turn. While she moved through the cabin assisting other passengers with a professional, almost cheerful efficiency, she barely acknowledged James. He sat quietly near the front of the plane, watching as she handed out blankets, helped stow bags, and answered questions. When she finally passed by him, she didn't even pause to ask if he needed anything. Instead, James overheard her whispering to another flight attendant near the galley. "Why do they even allow people like him to travel alone?" she said, her tone dripping with disdain. James froze, his heart sinking at the cruelty of her words. He shifted slightly in his seat, pretending to adjust his jacket as he processed the remark. He wasn't looking for pity or special treatment, just basic respect, but the lack of it was a bitter pill to swallow. Still, James chose not to react. Years of experience had taught him the value of patience and the power of silence. He gazed out the window, focusing on the vast blue sky as the plane prepared for takeoff. While the hurt lingered, he reminded himself that moments like these were why he traveled anonymously. To truly understand the experience of the people his airline served. James settled into his seat, his mind a swirl of emotions. The journey had barely begun, but it was already clear that it would leave a lasting impression on everyone involved. As the plane cruised smoothly at 30,000 feet, the hum of the engines blended with the low chatter of passengers and the occasional ding of the seatbelt sign. James sat quietly in his seat, his eyes gazing out at the endless expanse of clouds. He hadn't said much throughout the flight, his demeanor calm and composed, though Sarah's earlier comments still lingered in his mind. Then came the crackle of the intercom, pulling everyone's attention. The pilot's voice came through, warm and steady, a slight note of excitement in his tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying your flight. Today, we're honored to have a very special passenger on board. Please join me in welcoming Mr. James Roberts, the CEO of our airline." The cabin went silent for a split second, and then a wave of applause rippled through the rows of passengers. Heads turned in unison, scanning the cabin until they landed on James. He offered a modest wave and a polite smile, his humility evident even as he was thrust into the spotlight. Sarah, stationed near the front galley, froze in place, her face drained of color, her forced, professional smile vanishing as realization struck like a lightning bolt. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pieced it together. The man she had dismissed, ridiculed, and treated with blatant disrespect wasn't just another passenger. He was her boss. Her knees felt weak as she clutched the counter for support. A wave of regret and panic washed over her, and for a moment, she couldn't move. The applause died down, and the cabin returned to its usual hum, but Sarah's world had flipped upside down. She stumbled toward James's seat, her legs shaky and her mind racing. She reached him and hesitated, her hands wringing nervously. "Mr. Roberts? I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. James turned to her, his expression calm but his eyes piercing. "I know you didn't," he said evenly, his tone measured but firm. "That's the problem." The weight of his words hung in the air, more powerful than any raised voice or angry reprimand could have been. Sarah's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. She stood there, her face a mix of shame and disbelief, unable to meet his gaze. James, sensing the awkwardness of the moment, returned his attention to the window. His body language conveyed that he had said all he needed to. The message was clear, and there was no need for further confrontation. As Sarah retreated to the galley, her mind replayed every interaction she'd had with James that day. Each sigh, each condescending comment, each moment of neglect, they all came rushing back, now magnified by her newfound awareness. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she realized just how badly she had failed, not just as an employee, but as a person. For the remainder of the flight, Sarah moved mechanically, her usual confidence replaced with a quiet humility. She avoided James's gaze, though the memory of his calm, measured words remained etched in her mind. It was a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. After the plane landed and passengers disembarked, James waited patiently as the crew went about their post-flight duties. As the last passenger left the jet bridge, James quietly requested to meet with the entire crew in a private lounge at the airport. His tone was calm but firm, leaving no room for debate. Word spread quickly among the crew, and a sense of unease settled over them. Sarah's stomach churned as she followed her colleagues into the quiet room. She knew what this meeting was about and felt a mix of shame and anxiety. The air in the room was thick with tension as the crew gathered, some glancing at Sarah with curiosity, others with sympathy. James sat at the head of the room, his demeanor composed but serious. He waited until everyone was settled before beginning. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me," he started, his voice steady and commanding, yet free of anger. "First, I want to say I appreciate the work you do every day. Being part of an airline crew isn't easy, it takes dedication and a lot of effort." The crew exchanged brief, uncertain glances, unsure where this was going. James paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before continuing. "That said, I want to talk about something very important, how we treat our passengers. Today I traveled not as your CEO, but as an ordinary passenger. I wanted to see firsthand how our customers experience our airline." What I encountered was disappointing." His words hung heavy in the air. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks burning as she avoided eye contact. She felt as if every word was directed solely at her, though James never singled anyone out. "Every passenger deserves respect," James went on. "It doesn't matter who they are, what they look like, or what challenges they face. For many people, air travel can be stressful or even intimidating. Our job is to make it easier, not harder. It's not about special treatment, it's about basic decency and kindness." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of an air conditioning unit. Finally, Sarah couldn't hold back any longer. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Roberts, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I wasn't thinking, and I deeply regret my actions." Her eyes glistened with tears, her face a portrait of remorse. James regarded her for a moment, his expression softening slightly. "Apologies are a start," he said gently, "but actions speak louder than words. What matters is what you do from this moment forward." Sarah nodded, tears spilling over as she whispered, "I understand. I'll do better, I promise." James nodded in return, his tone encouraging yet firm. "Good. Remember this, every person who steps on that plane is the most important passenger, at least in their own world. Maybe they're flying to a job interview, or visiting a loved one, or even saying goodbye to someone for the last time. To them, this flight matters, and how we treat them matters too." The crew nodded solemnly, the truth of his words resonating deeply. James's calm and thoughtful approach made his message even more impactful. He didn't berate or humiliate them, he simply reminded them of the responsibility they carried. As the meeting concluded, the crew left the room with a renewed sense of purpose. Sarah, though still shaken, felt an odd sense of relief. She vowed to herself, and to James, that she would never take another passenger for granted again. For James, the experience reaffirmed his belief in the power of humility and the importance of leading by example. He didn't need to shout or demand respect, his quiet dignity spoke volumes. And in that room, his words planted seeds of kindness and professionalism that would continue to grow long after the meeting ended. From that day forward, Sarah's behavior transformed. She became known for her kindness and professionalism, and her story became a lesson shared during training sessions for new hires. James's decision to stay calm and use the experience as a teaching moment created a ripple effect that improved the airline's customer service across the board. James never mentioned the incident publicly, but for Sarah, it was a turning point in her life. She realized that every interaction, no matter how small, has the power to make or break someone's day. And sometimes, it takes an unexpected moment to remind us of the importance of kindness and humility. Thank you so much for watching this story. It means the world to us. If you enjoyed the journey and want to hear more stories that inspire, move, and surprise, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to stay connected and never miss a new story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about today's story? Drop a comment below and join the conversation. And if this story touched your heart or made you think, give it a like and share it with your friends and family. Together, we can spread these powerful messages far and wide. Your support helps us keep creating the content you love. Thank you for being a part of our community.